Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar this evening. I'm so glad you could all join me. I'm Karen Beckham. I'm a financial coach here at Enable Me. Tonight we're going to be talking about wealth creation and resilience, and those are the things that we need to safeguard our future. So later on this evening we'll have Andrew and Sam joining us, and the lovely Carla, the hostess with the mostess. So Andrew is one of our wealth experts here, and Sam is one of our insurance experts. So should be a really good evening. So I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. So I'm Karen Beckham. I'm a financial coach here at Enable Me. My background is that I have been prior to joining Enable Me, I worked in banking for over 30 years. So I've got lots and lots of experience with lending and insurances and wealth growth, building retirement funds. So I was a bank manager for over 20 years. I worked in a premium banking centre looking after high income, high net worth clients. Very interesting. I love helping people get ahead by lending and investments and making sure we're protected. So we're going to make a start. So this evening's presentation is information only. The content is not intended as a substitute for regulated financial advice. If you'd like that, you can join with our financial coaches later. So, what are we going to be looking at this evening? Well, we're going to be looking at prioritising our wealth. Well, should we be prioritising our wealth? I think we should, because what actually happens if we prioritise our wealth, we're doing things like giving ourselves options for the future, giving ourselves a bit of flexibility about what we can do in the future, giving ourselves some security to make sure that we reduce stress and be prepared for life's unexpected things that pop up from time to time. Obviously, it also helps us overcome some financial challenges a little bit more easily, and we've all been through those recently. And also allows us to do things for our loved ones, like leaving legacies and that. But it also helps us be ambitious, because we need to be ambitious, because if we're not ambitious, we just stay where we are. So it's really, really critical to really look at funding our retirement for the future. So when we look at retirement, these are some statistics here that are quite interesting. So growing wealth is essential for our financial well-being, but 44% of Kiwis feel prepared for retirement. So there's a lot of people that don't feel prepared for retirement. 54% of Kiwis are worried about money, either daily or weekly, and those are those times when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you start worrying about whether or not you've got enough money to pay your bills and whether or not you're going to be sorted for retirement. So that's a lot of people up in the middle of the night worrying about money. 70% of Kiwis expect they're going to need to work past retirement age. So at the moment, obviously, our retirement age is 65. That might change in the future. I don't know. But I don't know about you, but I'd rather work past retirement because I choose to, as opposed to having to for financial reasons. So growing wealth isn't about having luxury, but it is about having a nice, comfortable retirement. And that's what we're wanting to help you achieve here at Enable Me. So we want to de-stress our lives, we want to have better choices, and we want to grow wealth for the future. So how do we do that? Right, well, we start off by looking at our tendencies and our money personalities. So with regards to our money personalities, there's a few different ones that we have, and sometimes we can change from time to time depending on the situation we're in. When I was a bit younger, I was a definite shopper. In fact, when I met my husband, he told me I had a black belt in shopping. But as time's gone on and I'm getting closer to retirement, I've become more of a plodder. So I'm going to go through these different things. I've never been a saver, but my sister is definitely a saver. So our money personalities do affect what we do with our money. So our shoppers are energized by spending, and it's not necessarily spending money on themselves. It might be spending on people that they are spending their money on the people that they love in their life. So it could be gifts, it might be taking people out for a nice meal, it could be cooking at home, having a little bit of a party, or it could be just buying something nice for themselves. So they're energized by spending. It makes them feel really good. And then on the other side, I'm going to move to the other side, the little piggy on the other side, are savers. Our savers love having money sitting in the bank because it gives them security. It gives them that sense of safety, that they've got money there. So if something unforeseen happens, they're going to be okay. But sometimes it stops them moving ahead because they get a bit anxious about spending that money. And then in between our shoppers and our savers, we have our plotters. And our plotters are quite happy to spend a little bit of money when they want to, and they can save when they want to. But it sometimes, again, stops them moving ahead because they might be a little bit more risk adverse and they tend to sort of move along at a slower pace. But they're a nice personality type because they can do either one. They can enjoy life, but they can sort of put money away for later. And then we have our risk profiles, and our risk profiles actually either hinder us or help us moving ahead in life with regards to what we decide to do. So we have our safety wardens. Our safety wardens need to know the rules. They need to understand the facts and the figures before they're going to make a decision about what they're going to do with their money or their lending or whatever it might be. We've got our adventurers, and they're the kind that go, yeah, let's just do it. We know it's the right thing to do. Let's get ahead and do it. And then we've got our dreamers that like the idea of doing it, but they might procrastinate. So therefore, they will stop themselves doing things. So we really need to make sure that we are balancing the risks and the rewards and those security. And it's really key to the progress that we're making. So we've got to understand our money personality and our appetite for risk. So at Enable Me, what we do is we look at strengthening your financial foundations. And we do that by looking at the things like money habits. So that's understanding our money personality and why we spend money the way we do. And we look at how we can set some little goals for people. Because if you're like me, who has been a spender in the past, having goals, short-term goals to work to really helps me understand where I want to spend my money and where I want to stop spending my money. We look at our cash flow. We need to understand how much life costs us. So it's really important to understand how much your life costs, and that helps us understand how much we need for retirement. If you've got those horrible little short-term debts, we don't want those. We want to get rid of those because they just suck money out of our wallets all the time. Managing our mortgage is really important because we need to be really efficient with the way we're paying our mortgage. And the two biggies that sit along the side there are our insurance and our KiwiSavers. They sit and they protect us and they grow for our retirement. So that's all how we sort of look at creating wealth and then getting ready for our retirement. So we need to focus on all these areas to make sure we've got a very, very strong base for our financial futures. So where do we start? Well, we start at today. We understand where our starting point is. We need to understand what our cash flow management looks like. We need to get rid of those short-term debts, our mortgages, really focus on them, and then we need to look at savings. So those short-term debts, those high interest rate loans, those payday loans, they slow our wealth accumulation. They slow down our ability to pay off our mortgage. So it's really important we get away from those. But we need to understand what our goals are. What do we really want to achieve? So if we want to pay off our mortgage, so that gives us those options to start saving for the future, for our retirement, we need to understand how we can do that and what our time frame is. And then from there, understanding how long we've got to go until retirement, how we do that. So it's really a lot about maximizing our opportunities. We work on our surpluses and we make sure that we maximize them to the best ability that we possibly can. And that's where having a financial coach really helps you understanding how we do that. And then we look at whether or not our behavioural tendencies help us when it comes to doing things like leveraging, because those risk aversions can stop us or help us get ahead. So what is a wealth plan? So a wealth plan is a mix of different assets and a strategy to help you get ahead. It's normally tailored for your goals and your timelines. And it's about understanding, knowing what your financial habits are so that you can maximize what you have. So we really need to understand where you are today, what's your starting point, where you would like to be, how long you've got to go, those tendencies. And we talk about the hand you've been dealt. That does not mean that you've got parents that have given you a huge amount of money, but the hand that you've been dealt is the situation that you find yourself in today and how you can actually change it, control the controllables. So the most important thing, if you have got a mortgage on your home, please concentrate on getting rid of that as quickly as you possibly can. It's always our first goal. It's the thing that we talk about at Enable Me all the time, because as soon as you get that mortgage down, it then gives you the opportunity to save for your retirement, to grow wealth for your retirement. But you don't have to be completely mortgage free to be able to leverage to buy investment properties. So a lot of people come along to us and they say, right, we're mortgage free. What do we do next? But really, you could do that a few years before you become mortgage free, because often, if your mortgage is at a lower level and the repayments aren't too high, you can use the equity in your property to grow wealth by buying another property. So it's really important you talk to us as soon as you possibly can. So this gives you a little bit of an example of what happens when you start to think ahead and look at what can happen when you actually repay your mortgage earlier. So if we can get mortgage free, say at the age of 55, now I saw a couple yesterday, they were mortgage free at the age of 47, masses of opportunities available for them. They really stuck to their plan and they got where they needed to be. So what that means is if they've got mortgage free earlier, they can then save for their retirement. If they have a little bit of retirement funds in there and they start to have some post-retirement wealth management building in, that means that they, at the age of 65, they've already got quite a long way ahead with that wealth creation piece in here. And then you can see that 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 red line shows that their savings stretch that much further. If you get mortgage free at the age of 65, you're losing this middle gap part here to actually grow your wealth. So, I mean, that's an extra 10 years that you could have growing wealth. So you're pretty much mortgage free at 65. Whatever you've managed to accumulate in your KiwiSaver, etc., they will not last very long. But if you also add in having some retirement funds, that obviously stretches that out a little bit further. So it's about having a balance of those things. So we want to really aim for us to get those final 10 years in where we can invest and grow our wealth so that we don't run out of money in retirement. So goal setting and planning is really important. The number of people that come to see us and they actually have got no budget and no plan is actually quite frightening, but it's very, very common. So it's really important to understand how much you need, how long you're going to need it for, what your risk adversity is and your volatility, your feelings about volatility, and how that's going to influence what's the best approach for you. So obviously we've got a lot going on in the Middle East, and if any of you have looked recently at your KiwiSavers, there's a bit of volatility coming in, but that does happen quite often. So over the years, we've seen lots of different things. We've just seen the GFC, we've seen COVID, we've had lots of different incidents, and we do see the KiwiSavers managed funds kind of go through that, but they do go up and down and they finally come out of it. So it's really important to understand your risk tendencies, but you've got to stick to that long game. If you know where you are today and where you need to be, what is that time frame? You need to know that if you're in the right type of fund or investment option, you can ride those ups and downs out. So it's really, really important that you align your timeframes and the type of investment fund carefully, but also that you have those conversations with your partner, because sometimes partners can have different ideas about what they want to do. They could have different money personalities. They could have different risk appetites, and you need to have really good conversations, and you need to speak to an expert to understand what it is that's going to suit you both. Right, so there's lots of different types of investments that we can have, and this gives you a little bit of a graph, and it shows you what the risk is. The higher the risk, the higher the return. So you can see down here in the bottom left-hand corner, cash is the lowest risk and the lowest return. So if you've got money sitting in the bank at the moment, if it's in an on-call account, you're getting probably 1% if you're lucky. By the time you get taxed and by the time inflation comes off, you're very, very lucky if you've got a bit of a return going on there. You might even find that that's going backwards. But as we sort of move up the scale, we can see that the risk increases slightly, but the return also increases. So then we have things like term investments, we have our managed funds, we have property, we have shares. And then we've got business, and you can see that as they go up the scale, our return is increasing, but our risk is also increasing. So the bigger saving gap, the bigger gains that we need to make. So that's where sometimes people can make the wrong mistake, because if they feel that they don't have enough money, they might take risks that they don't need to take. So it's important that we actually analyze what kind of investment that you need and make sure that you've got a nice stable growth that you feel comfortable with, but you've got the time frame to actually move through those different funds that you've got there. So it's really important to have a well-planned strategy that balances that risk and returns and achieves your financial goals. So we talk a lot about KiwiSaver, and people ask, is it worth it? Absolutely yes. KiwiSaver is worth having, because it comes from your pay before you see it. And I don't know about you, but I've got no idea how much comes out of my fortnightly pay. It goes out. I can see that my balance normally goes up, except for when Donald Trump's bombing Iran. But it comes out of your pay. You don't notice it. It's gone. Then our employers are then contributing to our KiwiSaver. And this is one of the biggest advantages that we have with KiwiSaver. So if your employer's you're putting in 3% and your employer matches 3%, fantastic. If they give you a little bit more, if they say we'll do 6%, if you do 6%, fantastic, go for it. It's really important that you do take advantage of those KiwiSavers, because if you've got a long time frame, they do build very, very nicely, and you actually don't even notice it from time to time. But we do recommend that KiwiSaver shouldn't be your only option for retirement savings. So remembering that there are some reasons why you can take money out of KiwiSaver. The nicest one is probably your first home purchase. So if you're taking money out for first home purchase, fantastic. But if you need to take money out for other reasons, they're pretty horrible reasons. So we don't want to be taking money out because we're in financial hardship, and we don't want to be taking money out because we have a terminal illness. Or severe medical problems. So if you're wanting to save more, we recommend, because of the some of the fact that you have to have quite horrible reasons to take money out, that you do save in other ways if you're wanting to accelerate your long-term retirement savings. So it's a great foundation, and it just works its way in the background there for you, just building up over time your contributions, your employer contributions. Great option there. So we talk here a little bit about the pros and cons of term investment and short-term savings. So the benefits are that they are liquid. You can take the money out of a short-term savings account instantly. Term investments, not quite so instant, but they're safe, they're passive, they're really easy to look after, and you don't have to do very much work with them. They just sit there bubbling away. But the drawbacks are low returns. As I say, some of those online savings accounts, you're lucky if you get 1.5%. Then you've got inflation eating into that. So at the moment, inflation is just over 3%. So if you're earning 1%, paying tax, then inflation, you're going backwards. And again, you're paying tax, as I say there. So that's some of the drawbacks for having term investments and short-term savings. Term investments, obviously, you invest for a certain period of time. That rate is locked in for the time that you've said you're going to invest for, and it can be difficult to take your money out prior to the maturity date. So they're just some things to think about there. The pros and cons of managed funds. So again, they are relatively liquid. Most of them you can take money out between 3 to 5 working days. They are diversified, so you're investing in lots of different asset classes. You've got a lot of different options about where you invest, who's the provider, the type of variety or of investment style. So a lot of people really want to make sure that they're not investing any money in something that they don't agree with, that might go against their values. And there's lots of different types of risk funds available as well. They are managed on your behalf, so you don't have to worry too much about those. But some of the drawbacks are they could have higher fees. Some people do find a little overwhelmed by the amount of choice they've got, and there is a bit of volatility like we see with KiwiSaver. So it's really important to make sure that the type of fund that you are in suits your time frame. So we see this with KiwiSaver. We've got conservative funds, we've got balanced funds, we've got growth and aggressive. And again, if we're starting at the top, they are the lower risk type of investments. As we move down through the balanced growth and aggressive funds, the percentage of growth assets and cash assets reduces in the aggressive fund. But you can see here that are an average over the last 5 years, the aggressive fund does give you a better return, but they do have that little bit of volatility that comes in there. So it's important that you talk to somebody about making sure you're in the right fund, one that fits with your ethics and your values, but also is giving you the right return for the length of time you're needing to have it invested. Right. The pros and cons of property. So the benefits are is it is a very stable asset class. There is a rental yield. It provides growth over time. It is tangible so you can see it, and it can be leveraged, which is really important. The drawbacks is obviously the low liquidity. So if you need to take some money out of a house, it's really hard unless you can borrow against it, but you can't exactly sell a bedroom. So that liquidity is a little bit lower there. You can have, it could cost you a little bit more to get money into it because you do need to have equity. And not all investment properties are equal. So it's not about just buying an investment property, it's buying the right investment. And there is a limited time frame for lending. So as we're getting a bit older, the banks don't always like to lend to us quite as much. And when we're getting older, low investment properties, they do consider your rental income as a lifelong sort of income. So, there are some mitigants there for you. But if your retirement gap is going to be more than $300,000, we believe that you are more likely going to need to leverage to buy an investment property to be able to bridge that gap to actually have a bit of growth in your portfolio for a few years there. This chart just explains to you the power of leveraging. So there's two options here. We're looking at having $160,000 to invest. If you put that into a managed fund, $160,000 with a growth rate of 6% gives you an annual return of $9,600. If you have that same amount of money available to put into an investment property or equity, at 6% growth rate for property, that return, because the asset you're buying is a larger asset. So if you've got $160,000 and you buy a house that's worth $800,000, that 6% return is actually on the value of the asset of the $800,000. So the return in that case would then be $48,000. So what we're saying is that the left-hand side with the managed funds, you've got a lower base to start growing your wealth, which is that 160,000, but the property, because you're buying an asset which is worth 800,000, will go up in value at a higher rate, even though the growth rate is both 6%. Hope that makes sense. Right, some of the common mistakes about investing. So some of the common mistakes are listening to the wrong people when it comes to advice. And we hear this often as financial advisors. It's their families, their friends, and their neighbours that give fantastic financial advice, although they're not financial advisors. So ideally, you want to speak to the right person. The lack of diversification is another thing that we see, and that is believing that you only need to have really one kind of investment choice. Now, that can also be diversification about where you buy an investment property. So I saw a couple recently that had a couple of properties in Wellington, and unfortunately the property market in Wellington has taken a bit of a dip because they had their own home and their investment property. Both properties have gone down in value. So it's good to have a bit of a diversification even where you buy your investment property. People not prioritizing short-term debt. Short-term debt is normally paid off over a period of normally under 6 years, but those payments are quite high. And because the payments can be quite high, the interest rate's high, the term's short, it means there's a lot of money coming out of your budget that you could be using for something else. So really get rid of that short-term debt. A lot of people come to us and say, I wish we'd done this years ago. We don't want to wait too long, but we can't say it's not the right time to invest. Always come and talk, because there's no time is like the present. So don't wait too long. Don't think you have to be mortgage free before you can do something. Get stuck in. Investing everything without leaving an emergency buffer. So that's really important, that you always have 3 to 6 months worth of liquid assets available should something happen that's unforeseen. And then a lot of people do make emotional decisions, so that's not a good thing to do. It's a bit of a mistake there. So the best approach for you, well, that all depends on things like your time frame, your goals, that risk appetite, your capacity for risk, your cash flow requirements, flexibility, the ability to access mortgage lending, the access to equity, and the wealth goal. So with an investment plan, time in the market is far better than timing the market. So that's a really important saying by Warren Buffett. So everyone's situation is different. So everyone that's on the call this evening will be a different age. They'll be at a different stage. You might have mortgages. You might not have mortgages. You might be investing already. But it's really important that you start looking at getting a good plan to get ahead. And leveraging is very, very important, because it does allow you to use an asset, which is normally your home, that produces no income, to actually produce something that can help you get ahead in a nice, easy way. So as I say, it's not about timing the markets, the time in the markets that's really important. So now I'm going to introduce our panel for our question and answers. So it's me, Karen. Andrew is our wealth expert, and Sam is our insurance expert. They're going to join us shortly. And from there, our beautiful, lovely Carla, the hostess with the mostess, will help us with our panel. If you're wanting to know what a financial consultation is, I'll just quickly go through this, because this is what I do every day. Financial consultation is normally a 90-minute strategy session from one of our coaches here at Enable Me. We go through and we get the picture of what your finances look like. We assess your assets, your income, your spending, your debts, mindset, and goals. We try to find and identify those inefficiencies that we see with a bit of fritter coming through the banks. The mortgage structure may not be quite right, and we find ways of actually helping you improve your trajectory. So that's what we do at Enable Me. So it's a wonderful, very informative session, and I do recommend you look at booking it. So now if we can get Carla, Sam, and Andrew on, we can have our Q&A.
Hi, Karen. Thanks very much for just giving us a bit of a kind of basis to have a bit of a chat tonight. And so thanks everyone for taking time to join us. And obviously the purpose of giving you that foundational kind of conversation with Karen is just to give you some thinking points. But if you've got any questions, please, by all means, I see we've got a couple of comments in the question and answer section. But if you've got any questions that you want to ask, please, by all means, drop them in and I will try and get to them as well. What I wanted to do is start off by saying, and Karen, you've kind of given us a lot of details there, and we've obviously talked about different types of investing. So there's kind of the investing that you do in terms of fund investing, be that KiwiSaver or managed funds. We've obviously talked a lot about property investing, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But what's the kind of mind shift that has to happen, Karen, when you actually want to start thinking about building long-term wealth? Because obviously we as New Zealanders spend a bit of time getting together savings to kind of buy our first house. But then there's quite a sort of mind shift that has to come when we want to start thinking about longer term wealth, because we're kind of really ingrained about getting our house, but
Yeah.
once we're building for retirement, it's a bit more than just having your family home in order to kind of get ahead. So what's that mind shift that has to happen?
I think the big thing, Carla, is that for such a long time, we're paying off mortgages. And that's our sole kind of focus about what we want to do. So, all the time I was in banking, everyone's goal was, I want to get mortgage free. And then you'd say, well, why do you want to get mortgage free? Well, I'm not quite sure at the moment. And they don't have a plan for what happens at that point in time. So I think that mindset changes from paying down debt to having to accumulate wealth. And that's a big mindset change. And some people are just really good at paying off debt. It takes them a long
It's
time,
me,
but
Karen. I've
they're
really
good at doing
struggled
it.
with that
But the
shift.
saving side is not as easy for
Yeah.
some people. And again, coming back to that money personality, if you're a bit of a shopper, you might still think, well, I've got that mortgage payment now, so I can have the slightly better life. But actually, you've got to really think about that future. So I think the mindset changes, trying to get away from just paying back debt to actually starting to change and accumulate wealth. And that can be done in lots of different ways, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that that's such great feedback because I know that I've had that conversation multiple times today and been and through the course of this week, and it's such a shift because I'm not like you, Karen. I'm the saver, and I'm really good at kind of paying down debt, and it actually takes a huge mind shift to actually go to the other side of being like, actually, I have to have a different strategy to kind of build wealth. One of the things I'm going to ask you quickly before we start to loop in Andrew and Sam a little bit more. Obviously, a lot of what you do is kind of for those of us who are in relationships. Sometimes those financial goals can be a little bit different, and we can have kind of different attitudes towards money. We talked about the fact that you're a spender, I'm a saver. Um, how does that work when what your goals look like can be quite different?
Yeah, I think it's you've got to have really good conversations and you need to have a plan that you can both work to because if you are a saver, you can get quite irritated when the other person wants to spend money on things that you think are frivolous. So I think if there is a plan and there is money assigned that can be spent for things, the spender can say, all right, well, look, I know I've got X amount of money that I can spend on, say, clothes or whatever it is that I want to spend. I've got permission to do that because it's within my plan. And we know if we both work on that plan together, it is going to work. So it's having that belief that we're doing the right thing, it is that trust that the plan is going to do the right thing. And for the savers, it means that they know as long as the spenders are keeping within their spending plan, we're going to be okay. I also do recommend to people that have got money, different money personalities, that you can have a discretionary fund or like little pocket money account. And that money isn't tracked by us and it's not tracked by your partner, but it gives you the ability to go and spend little bits of money on things that you get joy out of spending money on. And if your partner has the same amount, they're probably going to squirrel it away and save it. It's not a large amount, but it's just enough to take some of that friction out of a relationship because we know that money is one of the biggest causes of, people, fighting. Really,
Yeah,
we do also
yeah,
have people that say that they just don't talk about money because they know that the minute they talk about money with their partner, it's just going to end up in an argument. So some people
yeah,
just shut down and just don't talk about it.
yeah. Sam, Andrew, I'm sure no arguments about money ever happen in your households.
No, never.
Never, never. So let's just talk a little bit, and I'm going to start to come on to some of these questions. But there's one thing I kind of wanted to talk to, which I'm going to start to loop you in a little bit about, Andrew, is Karen, obviously you've talked a lot about we can use lots of different strategies, and obviously you talked a couple of times tonight about property as being a great strategy that you will often talk to clients about. And it's really nice strategy when we've got a large gap to close because there's the advantage of leverage, which you kind of explained, where we can borrow against the kind of asset to get more. And Andrew, obviously, as a wealth advisor, you deal with a lot of people around kind of managed funds. Like, how should someone decide? So Andrew, I mean, that's a kind of tricky one, but it's like, when you're working with people and trying to decide where to put their money and what to do, what are you working with?
Yeah, so for us, investment strategy is also one of the most important decisions you can make, and sticking or staying the journey with that strategic asset allocation is as important. So I guess, one of the most common mistakes we see people make is is de-risking with volatility. Um,
Yeah,
so so what we see is people have that strategy in place. KiwiSaver investors in particular, they can go in and change their strategy anytime they like. Often they do that when markets are at or near their very low points. They take on more income assets at the expense of the growth assets, the risk reward assets. When the recovery comes, often shortly thereafter, they miss that bounce back and recovery. So it's important you determine your risk strategy, your overall strategy. And the way we often do that is sitting down with clients and working through a risk profiler. So determine what's important to them, what risk levels of volatility or what appetite for risk they have. Time frames also important. How
yeah,
long they are invested for. If young individuals are in an extremely aggressive strategy, which could well be right for them if they start talking about purchasing homes, properties, we need to ring fence those funds and we need to look after those funds. So often we would de-risk because their circumstances have changed.
yeah. And so that's great because Karen, that also applies to property, doesn't it? Because it really like you need to know your risk tolerance and your time frames because that's just like the key. Whatever asset class you're choosing, it has to match.
Right, absolutely. I mean, not very many property investors would buy a property for a year. I mean, it's normally it's a long game, isn't it? That's what people buy it for. Um, so I think it's really important that you keep to that strategy, as Andrew said. It's all about thinking about why did I go into that asset, and you hold for that period of time. Like at the moment, I looked at my KiwiSaver this morning, it's dropped by 7,000. I'm not going to do anything about it because I just know and trust the process that over time it will go back up in value. And it's the same with house prices. So it's a matter of understanding the strategy and why you've invested in that particular asset class.
Yeah. And so when you've got when you're in a situation where you've got, say, a pot of money and you don't really know your time frames, that's a really good situation whereby talking to an advisor and kind of going like you sort of showed that really lovely line, Karen, but there, like we hate to see people put money into the bank or a term deposit, but
Yeah.
Andrew, like a term deposit's the right place to be if you're kind of like, well, in 3 months I might need that money, or 6 months I might need that money, but we don't want it sitting there if it's going to be there for 10 years. It's all about that time frame, isn't it? Or that uncertainty piece about when you're going to get hold of it.
Absolutely. If you know you have a need for those funds, then term deposit could be the best place for it. However, just because you reach retirement age doesn't mean you don't have, unless there's a need for it, doesn't mean you don't have 25 to 30 years of investment time frame ahead of you if you're supplementing
Absolutely.
your
Yeah.
income. So determining that time frame isn't necessitated by reaching retirement age. It's when those funds will be
Yeah.
will be required. Sorry.
Yeah. Which is one of our favorite conversations, right? Because lots of people go, I'm 65 years old, which means it's time to pull out my KiwiSaver. And it's still got 25 years to do its job. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And the best performance days often follow the worst performance days as well, right? So de-risking is a highly risky
yeah,
process.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And funnily enough, like we talked a lot about risks, and I'm going to come back to that a little bit, but like whilst we're touching on the risk piece, there's a reason that we've got Sam with us here tonight, and it's not just because you're like, the younger one to keep all of us on track, Sam, but it's one of the big things when you're building wealth is we sort of said there's a mindset change that needs to happen because often when you're kind of paying off mortgages, it's all about kind of focusing on saving and getting ahead. But a wealth strategy actually can have some more risk elements to it, right? So if you're investing in property or you're doing some things that kind of involve taking some more risk, um, there's really some things that you need to consider in your overall strategy to kind of underpin that risk to make sure that you're protected. And so one of the things is that and Karen, maybe we'll start with you. When you're building one of those plans, like I'm assuming that like people's risk is something that you take into account, and how they're covered from an insurance point of view is something that you will consider really carefully.
Absolutely, Carla. Look, honestly, people think they save money by not taking out insurance policies. You know, having the right insurance in place is so important, because when something goes wrong and you've prioritized something else above paying off an insurance premium, you know, to cover you in the unexpected, that whole plan could fall over. So it's really important that you have the right insurance. So we don't want you to be overinsured. We don't want you to be underinsured, but we want you to have the right insurance for your age and stage. It's really important. I've seen so many people that say they had children, you know, they had a young family, they felt that they couldn't afford to pay their insurances, so they cancelled them. And I had one couple recently, and he was diagnosed very young with Parkinson's disease, no insurance in place at all, but they prioritised when their kids were little not to pay those insurances. Now, that's not to say that they don't have Sky TV, Netflix, Neon, other things like that. So a lot of the time it's about priorities. You know, like we don't want, like it's kind of like a doomy thing, isn't it? Like we think, well, if we pay insurance, it's because we think something bad's going to happen, but we don't really want to have to claim on it, but it's there when we need it. And that's the most important thing. So in a plan, you should always have good insurance cover. And that's why we always refer our clients to our specialists like Sam to make sure that our clients aren't overinsured. They've got the right cover in place for that right age and stage of their lives.
Yeah, Karen, you just on that, it's a risk diversification. When you're investing, you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. Most people don't have all of their money in property or all of their money in KiwiSaver or in managed funds or in bonds. Is generally split up across different areas because we want to diversify that risk. We don't want everything all allocated in one place, and insurance should be factored into that, ensuring that there is money allocated specifically for insurance to go along with those investments. Because
Yeah.
you said not too
Yeah.
long ago, something you have to consider is why did I get into this specific form of investment in the first place, whether that be property or, again, managed funds or otherwise. And that's what we have to consider, is there's generally the reason you get into this specific investment in the first place, and that's often for retirement, right? Or is for generating wealth for the long term. And we don't want that wealth or that asset or that investment to be impacted by health or inability to work.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we sort of chatted about it recently, Sam, like just like there's risk tolerance profiling for when we look at like purchasing assets, there's risk tolerance profiling that you do in insurance as well, isn't there? So
Yeah, for sure.
that varies between age and stage as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for myself, being office based, I'm at relatively low risk of being unable to continue doing my job. But somebody that I know was a chef, and they broke their ankle, and it was bad enough to mean that they couldn't stand on their feet for long periods of time, which is quite hard when you're a chef. So it meant that he was no longer able to work in that occupation, and it's not something that he factored in, that he couldn't be a chef anymore if he injured his ankle.
Yeah.
So we do have to understand the risk that we're getting into and ensure that risk is protected to avoid having to liquidate assets.
The other thing that's really interesting in that wealth creation space as well is that obviously we kind of talked about it. Sam's far younger than I am, but as we enter, like a lot of us start to think about wealth creation in our 40s and 50s, because we start to have that ability, to consider that. And unfortunately, from a health point of view and the need to draw on that insurances, that becomes more of a challenge. But there are lots of benefits, and we often don't consider it of like, from level premiums point of view, Sam, like taking insurances out at a younger age and kind of getting on that journey earlier is, and so do you want to talk to that a little bit, Sam? Like one of those things about the benefits of kind of thinking about taking that insurance at an earlier stage?
Yeah, definitely. So there's two trains of thought, one being price and the other being health. Starting with the health, as you age, there's going to be health issues that pop up. It's inevitable, whether that simply be weight gain or whether that be something that's totally outside of your control, like cancers or heart attacks. The worse the condition, generally, the harder it is to get insurance as you age. So getting insurance as early as possible and ensures that you're avoiding having the difficulty later on by trying to apply for insurance.
Yeah.
So if you can get it early without any health conditions, then you're going to have a much easier time, and it's there's a chance it's going to be a lower price. On the price side of things, as you age, insurance does get more expensive, especially with trauma insurance. From the age of 40 onwards is when we start seeing cancers pop up. I've heard it called Sniper Alley in the past, where once you pass the age of 40, that's when people start getting
Some
hit.
of us in this webinar are in Sniper Alley, and one of us is not.
Well, that's that period of time is where you start to experience those price hikes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So if we review the option of leveled premiums, especially for those that are younger, then instead of the price creeping up each and every year with your age, it starts off at a higher cost but maintains that price.
Yeah.
So after a period of 10 years, you'll be paying much less than what you would being on stepped.
And just really quickly, like, what are some of the insurances that you should consider, just so we can round that out as a really nice kind of thing? Like, what are some of the things you should consider? So income protection, you mentioned trauma.
Yeah, income protection being the key one, specifically for wealth creation, because like I said, you've invested in an asset for a particular reason. The chances are that being retirement, and we don't want to have to liquidate that asset to then just to cover expenses, right? Even if you don't have a mortgage, there's still rates and food and bills to pay for, and having to try and pull your KiwiSaver out or liquidate managed funds or sell an investment property just to pay for food. That's not what we want to see. So having income protection in place to sustain your income up until retirement offers a lot of value for a lot of people.
Yeah. So so that's a really nice kind of segue into those. Oh, actually, one thing I was going to ask you is that, is there any particular area that you find from insurance that people kind of leave themselves exposed in this kind of wealth creation phase? Is it more just around not considering actually having the insurances in place to underpin kind of their kind of exposure to pay off? Yeah.
A big thing is simply being underinsured. If you have life insurance of $250,000, but your mortgage is $1 million, are you comfortable leaving a mortgage of $750,000 to your partner if you were to pass away, or would your partner then have to sell the home, and your kids would have to move schools because you have to move, or your partner has to move to a different area because it's cheaper?
Yeah. And so we often think about our home, our actual home that we live in. But once we go into wealth creation, what people need to remember is that you're not just trying to set yourself up to pay off the home that you're living in. Your partner then has to deal with any investment property or anything that you've also undertaken. So I think that's a really great point.
Totally.
You kind of touched
just one thing. Also, I've seen people that have got pet insurance, but they don't have insurance on their own incomes. And you're like, okay, where is your priority? Sorry, I love my dogs. I've got 2 golden retrievers, but they're not a priority when it comes to things like having the right insurance in place for myself and my husband. But it is funny what people do prioritize. So I think it's really, understanding why you've got those insurances there.
Yep.
So Sam just kind of touched on a little bit about retirement, and one of the things I always like to ask, and maybe Andrew, you kind of deal with people who are in retirement as they're kind of decumulating, but when should someone start planning for retirement? Is it ever too early?
Absolutely not, from my perspective. If you haven't started already, then we should be looking at this now. The sooner you start, the better position you'll be in. Cumulative growth over time creates a lot of wealth. So the sooner you start, the better off you'll be in retirement.
Yeah, no, that's and And I guess one of the questions, and one's just come up, which is is pet insurance a good investment, Karen? Well, I think
Well,
if you're
depends
if
what
you've got
kind of dog
everything
you've got and
else,
what they get into. Like my dog's been eating remote controls, all sorts of trouble. So, the only thing is I've found that you can't actually claim a lot. So I'm paying quite a lot of money for this
oh,
insurance, and then when I go to
really?
make claims, they give me back like $4. I'm like, oh, hang on, I'm paying like $100 for these
I
two
know.
dogs,
I tend to
and I get a
agree,
small
Karen.
amount back. So
I tend
yeah.
to agree. I've kind of assessed it and I'm like, it's a really tricky one. I just kind of think if my idiot runs in front of a car, where the grace might be with it, but I do tend to
Mm.
agree. One of the things I was going to say is that, when I love your answer about that, Andrew, which is that I agree, you can't you can't start soon enough. I guess one of the things that everyone's kind of asking at the moment is there's two topical things. I'm going to ask both you and Karen, which is Karen, obviously the property market. A lot of commentary at the moment, a lot of challenges about, has the property bubble burst in New Zealand and stuff like that. And so a lot of people are sort of saying, well, is it still worth investing in property for like your long-term wealth creation? Like, is it done and dusted? And I guess, yeah, do we still think that it is a worthwhile asset class for everyday New Zealanders?
I think it is because, look, at the end of the day, inflation is always around about that 3% mark or a little bit higher. Houses aren't immune from inflation. That's why they go up in values because of inflation. We still need places to live. There's always been a shortage of housing. Yes, we've caught up and now we're sort of in that little bubble of, being the wrong way around. But it's having the right investment property. I think that's really important. You've got to buy the right house. If you buy the wrong house, you may not get the kind of growth that you're wanting. But I think also when we're talking about, having $160,000 to invest. Now, if you've got a person that's got equity in their house and they can leverage and buy an investment property and they can still invest 160,000 in managed funds. So they still can have the benefit of doing both things if they've got equity in a home. So I think it's important to look at having both options available to you. A lot of it becomes personal preference as well. Like a lot of people like knowing it's a tangible asset, it's a property, they can see it.
Yeah.
And historically, it's always done very well. Also, I think to be aware if you're looking at the area you live in. So I originally came from Auckland, I live in Christchurch. The Auckland market has not been as buoyant, but outside of Auckland, there are areas that the prices are actually growing quite nicely. So I think you've just got to look at that again, that diversification of where you're buying your properties as well. I don't think property is dead because we all need somewhere to live, and not everyone is in a position that they can buy a house.
Yeah.
And some people prefer to rent.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback. And Andrew, the question of the week, which everyone is asking, obviously, with all the volatility in the market, is, um, managed funds will always be a place where people are putting things, but people in a volatile market, everyone starts to worry and they kind of go, well, are share markets and are managed funds like too risky? And maybe you can talk to the performance of markets over time, and is that still a good place for us to put our retirement savings?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the old saying, time in the market, not time in the market. Yeah, I think, if we talk about volatility in the market at present with Iran in particular, we really do see that as a volatility event more so than a structural shock.
Yeah.
We've been pricing in a short-term period of volatility, 4 to 5 weeks. Now, if there's a sustained disruption with Iran, if it becomes a growing risk, we're watching that constantly. So in the background, we're looking at that volatility. We do think it's more of an volatility event rather than a shock. Yeah, but time in the markets always will find new highs. That's what capitalism is about, really. We are working, businesses are in it to make money. So the markets will always find new highs.
Yeah. So I think what I've kind of taken from both what you and Karen have said is that when it comes to wealth creation strategy, it's not one size fits all. There's lots of options there. There's lots of ways that you can slice and dice this, and really what is going to work for you as an individual really depends on the time you've got to play with, what you feel comfortable doing, and basically sitting down and kind of having a plan that's going to work for both your time frame, your risk profile, and just you as a person, and if you're in a partnership, you two as people. I think, just to kind of round it out as well, and just, because I think the other kind of anchor pillar piece when we do any of this wealth creation is that it's really important. Sam's kind of covered off the real importance to have that risk piece underpinning it. But Sam, probably an area that you will kind of touch on sometimes when you work on the insurance side, it's also really important to consider that estate planning and having a will in place as well. So I guess when you do insurances, you would always talk to someone about the importance of creating a will, and just helping through that process.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's always good to have the beneficiaries and the policy owners on the insurance policy, but even better than that is having a will and just ensuring that your assets are divvied up how you want them. It's very important. I think everybody should have a will.
Love it. And people need to realize that, their KiwiSaver, once it gets to kind of that 42,000 or whatever, like that has to go through a will process. So that is also, you have to kind of couple all of those pieces together to really have a full will, sort of wealth plan. So yeah. Lots
the
of
other
people.
thing with the wills is also the power of attorneys. It's
Yes,
really
of course.
important
Yeah,
that
great
you
point.
get a power of attorney before you need it. So there's two types. There's the property and there's personal care and welfare. It's really important that if you have not got that, you get that done before you need it, because if you can't make decisions for yourself, your family has to go to court. There's two lawyers involved. It's really expensive. The easy option is to get your will and your power of attorneys done all at the same time.
And as you say, you can split them. My parents will trust me with the money, but they won't trust me with flicking the switch, Karen. So that says a lot about me.
And anything just on that as well, anything in sole name will go through probates above that 40,000. Anything in joint name or trust name will continue on as is. So investments and likes, if they can be in joint names, trust names, they will pass over to the surviving spouse.
Yeah, so that's fantastic advice, guys. I mean, I think we've covered a lot today. Lots of people are asking, like, should you pay down a mortgage? Do you pay off the investment property faster and things like that? And that really kind of depends on your overall strategy and what we're trying to do, because Karen, you can probably talk to that, but if you want to pay down an investment property faster, I think you kind of touched on it. Like, you could actually not pay down the investment property faster. You could actually divert some of that money into a managed fund, I think you said. So that's where getting some advice really pays off, because it doesn't mean that you have to just kind of pay something down faster. I think it was really great what you sort of said there. So look, I'm conscious that we're getting to time, because we've had a great conversation here, but I'm going to round out by asking each of you, like, in terms of wealth creation, let's start with you, Sam. What's one financial decision that you think people should sort of prioritize today? I mean, you're obviously looking from a risk lens, but what would you suggest that people prioritize?
Having a proper insurance review, if you've got insurance at the moment or don't, it's good to actually know what the options are and what's available. You don't ask your GP what oil your car takes. You don't ask your mechanic what medications to take. Don't ask your mates what insurance you should have. Talk to somebody that is into the industry and can guide you and explain what cover you have, what cover you don't, and what you could get.
And as our situation changes, like I sort of thought the other day, even myself, I mean, I'm in the industry, and I was like, oh, it's probably time to have that rechecked, because things just keep changing and shifting. Totally. Andrew, from your perspective, like, what's one decision that you would suggest people prioritize?
Yeah, review your existing investment strategies and ask yourself, have your circumstances changed?
Perfect. And Karen, let you finish us off for the night as you started us.
I'd say if you don't have a plan, get one. You need to sit down with one of the experts and work out how you can actually get ahead. You don't know what you don't know. I think, Sam, your analogy there about talking to the wrong people just shows you've got to talk to the right people. Is the most important thing that you can do. Get a good plan. If you work with your partner, you can achieve quite a lot. So if you don't get a plan, you'll just keep doing what you're doing and you're going to get the same results. So it's very important to sit down and have a chat with the right person. Get a great financial advisor, what I would suggest.
Well, thank you everyone who's joined us tonight. Karen, Andrew, Sam, always a pleasure to have a chat. Every time I do these, I learn something else and think, oh, I think I've just about learned it all, but set me off with more things to do. So we're just going to round out tonight by saying thank you to everyone who has joined us. I believe if you would like to come and talk to us about getting a plan put together, scan the QR code and we can get you in with one of the Enable Me consultants, and they will kind of work towards building a plan with you. If you want to just talk to us, even if it's to look at your wealth portfolio, or even come and actually talk to Sam about your insurances, because he would be really keen. And I think it's time for me and Sam to have a sit down, to be honest. We would be really happy to come and have a chat with you about that. So come through on that consultation link. We will work out what the best course of action is, whether that's to build a full kind of wealth plan for you, or that might just be a conversation around what's happening with your KiwiSaver or your existing investing strategy or your insurance strategy. But on behalf of us all here tonight, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to helping you in whatever way you can. Thanks to our panelists, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks,
Nice to
guys.
see you. Bye.